Hey there, welcome to another of my art classes. Today we are going to be painting this waterfall right here. This is going to be on a 14 by 11 inch canvas or canvas panel. So I've got my completely blank canvas panel here myself. I use them because they're a bit more durable. Today we're going to be, for painting it, we're going to be using this set here from Artist Loft. I am anyway. You can get a very similar set of your own. All the primaries, the red, green, blue, black, white, yellow. Using one of them, we've got a pencil. For brushes, we've got a very small little edge here just to use, you know, as we need fit on a few little edges. We've got one of these brushes here, but as you can see here, I've chopped away about 2/3 of it, just then as a small bit, because that's going to allow us to do the nice dragging, falling waterfall motion here of the water. There, we're going to got one of these to fill up paint fast at the initial bit. This to kind of when we add in this sort of secondary layer as we you know, get in with some shadows and stuff in on here. That's going to help get some thicker layers in. And this is a round brush that we'll be using for just for generally getting some of these rock face sort of things in here. So we'll be having a variety of brushes. We've got some water here to dab our thing in. Got a little paper, little towel thing here just for wiping the brush on. You see, I've obviously used that for a lot of painting. Let's get going, I say. If you're, now's a good time. If you're all set up, then let's get going. If you're still got to get ready, then, you know, now's a good time to pause it until you're ready to go. Right, I'm about to get started. Get your pencil, and we're gonna look at this shape that we've got to do here. We've got roughly this here, this waterfall thing. So that's going to be a very rough U shape there. Although the ledge is going to come out. This is a bit like, it's almost like the paintings. You see that the water's going to be trickling out of this area. Just here, if you see there, and then we've got the water will be coming out here over this like ledge. And then if you see the original painting where it is, it's about, this line here is about a quarter in, so you're looking to get about a quarter of the way up your canvas here. Same on the other side. And draw a rough line over there, and that's pretty much it, because we're going to do this base. We're going to paint it first and then paint in these rocks, so we'll do them afterwards, and they don't have to be exact anyway, they can be a little bit different as you wish. So now let's get on to the mixing of the paint process. I'm going to start by getting some yellow, getting some out there. Don't put too much paint down, and try and keep them in little piles like that, because you can always top it up and you don't want to use too many of your supplies or end up actually taking away all the space that we need for mixing colours. There's some red. Going to need some green. And we're also going to need a bit of white initially here. So now we're going to get on with mixing some form of brown that you see in here. There's all different types. You get a few different tones of like reddish colours, slightly reddy browns there, a bit more maroon like, then some like greeny moss type, mustardy sort of yellowy browns there. There's a few different tones of brown in there, and we're going to get to make sure this rather larger brush is dry. Wipe it off. Get a little bit of red, as you see here. Big bit of green. A little bit of yellow. Probably best to do yellow first, actually, if you haven't yet done that. Get a nice chunk of brown. Mix it in. See, we need more red to get this greater sense of brown about it. There you go. There you go, it's starting to have an interesting shade of brown to it. There's a few little spots here and there that'll be slightly different, which is fine. And now we're just going to literally fill in the white area here up until this line here you've got. So this is the bottom bit. We obviously don't touch that because that's going to be more turquoise colour, as you can see there. That we'll do shortly. And just get a lot in here now. Just literally fill it in. No real type of style done, other than the only thing I would say is don't put the paint on too thick, so otherwise it'll take a long time to dry, and then that'll make doing the other parts later on slower because you have to wait for the paint to dry. So don't put it on too thick. Make sure you spread it around. If you have got thick blobs on, make sure you spread it around nicely so it's, it's covered, but it's not big, thick paint. I'm going to mix a bit more. It's good to get a few different tones of the colours available here too, because it means that there's different tones in the rocks where the light would be hitting it. So you can see here, this is slightly different here. Try and bring a bit of each in and around the place. Now, see, I've got a slightly lighter bit of brown here. I'm going to add little random spots in here. Doesn't have to be too precise where you put it. The intention is to just get the paint down, get some interesting different tones in the rock colour. Try and get these different slight highlights we've got over the top going in a kind of straight way across now. So I'm getting a bit more red, yellow and a bit of white to add a different type of colour here, not so much of the green right now. Try and make a kind of not quite pink or peach, but like a peach mixed with a light brown sort of tone there. You can see that. Like I say, none of this has to be particularly perfect because we're going to be going over it in black paint anyway shortly to create the contours of rock face. This is just add a few different tones and rock colours into the thing without having to draw and paint every little bit independently. Just get some interesting colours in there. Make sure you cover all the white here, make sure there's no spots of white in the paint. And have a look if you've got anywhere that looks like there's a bit too much of one tone somewhere. Like I thought there was a bit too much green in that corner. I've added a bit of the slightly more reddy version of what we just mixed over there. Alright, and there's roughly the bit. There you go. So there's that pretty much done. You can see, step back and how it looks. See, slightly different tones in there. Now we need to clean off our brush here. Don't worry, that's just my dog coughing. Sounds like he's drank water too fast. So let's mix some turquoise. We're going to again need some green, but we are going to put it to this other side here where we can mix it on this side that isn't used. And again, not too much, we don't need to use too much space. Too much. And then onto some of the blue. To make the turquoise you need blue and green and a bit of white to make this type of colour that we're mixing. So you got the choice here. If you've got some white left over, you see I've got some white left over here, I'll just use that. If you haven't, pop some in this area yourself. So I'm going to get some of this blue there, dab of the green, get some there, and get a nice chunk of this white. See, mixing it, it's quite a bright colour here. As this is supposed to be a cold and flowing version of a waterfall right now, we're gonna, this colour is quite bright. I don't know if you can tell, it's quite a bright colour. So what you want to do if you want to tone down a colour, you do the opposite of it. So this is on a turquoisey thing leaning towards green. You see the actual painting here, it slightly leans towards the green in terms of on the turquoise spectrum. So the opposite of green is red. So I'm going to add a dab of red here, not much at all, just a little bit, just to put in. It will just mute the just how bright this type of green is. Slightly paler, less bright. Get some more white in for the colour. There you go, and I'm pretty much ready to put it on now. So feel free to use your big brush again for this. You can switch to one of the smaller ones if you want to be more precise as you go up to this line, or you can just literally do what I'm doing here, which is get it in on the edge and just move very slowly along it. Obviously if you go slightly into it, it doesn't matter too much because you can always cover it with a bit of the drops of the water in this, you see. when we do the white, you can cover the little bit slightly. It's quite a bright colour here, so shortly when we lighten it up a little bit we will try and make it less saturated in colour, a little bit paler. There you go, see that bit's done now. I'm going to use mainly just the white and whatever paint. I scooped up the white, got whatever paint is on this brush here now. I'm going to add a very tiny dab of red. There, you see, just a tiny on the corner there. Mixing just a tiny amount there. And then just add some in to add a slightly different tone to this water, particularly in the middle where it's going to be, the water is going to be flowing from more powerfully. If you're worried your thing is more blue on the spectrum of turquoise than yellow, you can always add a little bit of yellow here to the bit that we were mixing there, just to make it slightly more green, you see there, and then put a layer of this on it. It will just help bring some green tone into this already wet paint. It will naturally blend with it if you're soft enough with it in your painting motion. Now what I want you to do is wipe off this brush. In fact, you can leave it in there. Switch to this one, which is slightly smaller, good for doing a little bit of stuff here. And I want you to go, if you've got any leftover paint like I have here, pick some of it up, and we're just going to put some of it into this paint. I don't know if you can see here, but there's a few spots around here where there's a little bit of this type of thing into it afterwards to indicate where there is a slight, like a sandy element underneath the water. It's only very subtle, but if you see, I'm just putting it on here, just gives a slightly different tone to the water underneath. Just a little bit where we think these rocks may be. You see my brush marks, it's quite light. I'm holding the brush here, Just trying to get a nice few spots of this colour just to mute the brightness and saturation of this. Add the effect that there's a hint of sand going on underneath this. This water isn't too deep, and also that the reflections from all this brown will be on the water surface as well, as you see. It can't not be, really. So it also helps add to that. So you can leave a slightly brighter spot in the middle there, if you see. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch. Actually, whilst we're using this, it might be good actually to, you see this, continue on with this brush we were doing, get whatever brown you can here, and just put a light layer of it up here, just not too thick, not too much. We're going over this anyway, and you don't have to really go to the edge. Make sure there's probably a little gap there, you see, to separate out where the white line is that you drew. Just enough to put something there. I've got some of this. That looks a bit too green for my liking, so I'll add a bit of red. Even the colour tones out there. There you go. There's that bit. We're going to move on to some black now. I hope, like me, I've used quite a lot of this space, not a bit more than I'd like. I hope you've been more economical with space than I have. So you've got some black here. That's what we're putting out. Don't mind the little fidgeting noises you hear. I have a dog between my feet as I paint. It's just how it seems to happen over here. My studio assistant, as I like to refer to him as. Okay, so I've got this moving to this round thin brush here, and I have some black paint on it. I'm holding it at a distance. If you've got a smaller one, because not many are longer, then you'd probably be a bit closer. But make sure you have a level of freedom to your movement. Don't hold it like this, because we're not trying to be really precise here. I'm trying to be a little bit freer in our movement, so hold it a bit further back. Make sure you get a decent amount of paint on. And now you see the black lines here, the rock, which indicates the shadows in the rock face. We're going to create them now, and they're not going to be straight lines. They're going to be mostly straight, but they're going to have little contours in them. You see here, see like this. There, you can make them jaggedy. You could good to make sure you kind of got one line here, one somewhere near the middle, and then one a little bit further up, maybe somewhere around there. Whereas the rock face angle is going almost all the way across. So I make the grooves quite, some of them you'll want them to be nice and thick, some will be thinner. If the paint hasn't dried from the brown that we did previously, that's okay. Just make sure you get a bit more paint on to try and deal with the fact that the paint isn't completely dry. And there'll be a few bits where you'll want to do copying the contours of the rock face over a few little bits, like to indicate that this bit's sticking out. I'm going to need to do there, like this, like there's a little rock face bit there sticking out. There's some, having a look at this reference photo to see if it'll, what ideas we have. Like there's quite a big one here, so I can do there you see a big one. Just there's only a couple that we're doing all the way across, the rest we will just do individually. You can be thicker around the edges here, like with this, but now good to have a variety of how thick you want to do some of these. Like some of them you want to be thick, some you just like, if you want to go here, you go a lot thinner, so you're just touching it with the end of it there, just to create a thinner line. And this will give the indication of different type of rock face shadows, different bits that are thicker, some that aren't thinner, depending on what part of the rock is sticking out and which is the shadow underneath, which is where the light is going to hit on top, which we'll do shortly when we do. Like, as you can see, there's some rocks here that got a lighter side on top, so that will be where the highlights of where the light's hitting it is. So around here there's some lines for sure around this rock face here. It's okay if it curves slightly around the top here, because obviously this will slightly curve as a result of the natural shadow, and it's okay if you want to bring out the, like here where the water's going to be flowing from, there's a slight angle there. Remember, I'm going to add different types of rock face suggestions here, some thicker, some thinner, different types of shapes. Try and add a few that combine and copy to indicate that's where the rock, the pattern of the rock in that area is. Good not to get fixated on one area as we do this, and bring it in a kind of coherent whole, doing this whole thing. This glare isn't ideal, is it? Let me move it along, see if that helps. No. No. Just keep going with this, try and do different types of brush mark thickness. It's okay if some look a bit more translucent than others. Still going, keeping these different brush marks in. Be sure to put the occasional thick one in round here, because this is where you can, if you look on this, you can get the see here where the water's kind of bouncing off a darker edge here and on some of these, where then it'll help give us a direction for how we want to paint in the water when we get round to that. Still keep going. I know this can get monotonous after a while doing some of these bits. Just have to keep going. Not too far away. Trying to not let the shadow close in on the type of brush marks I'm making, make it easy for you to tell. And add the same, and just lighter bits in this top section now. Not much, just little suggestions. It's okay if you've not got much paint on at all, like that, just because we're going to go over this bit in lighter white at the end to indicate there's some sort of waterfall or something in the background there. So do this bit now. Now if you've got a nice suggestion of different types of potential rock areas here now, like I've got, if you've not, then feel free. You've been a bit slower, a bit more delicate in where you're putting the marks than me, feel free to keep going with this until you're done. Maybe even pause it if you need to, because I'm about to move on to using up some of this black paint here to add in the little suggestions for the rocks. Not much, just where they're going to go, which is just literally like you see there. Like if you're looking here, this top one is going to be this. On this side it's going to start around there, go to somewhere around here. This next one, yeah, I use my fingerprints on that, don't worry, I'll be painting over that in shortly later on. If you do anything like that, you can fix it. You can either get some paint and put it on straight away, or we're going to be going over it with lighter stuff later on, so that's fine. the second one is going to be, see this face, is going to be somewhere around here. Not too close to where we're at right here, but there. And then we're going to move to this one. It's probably more convenient, this bit where I got a black mark. So it's about there. And finally you see this one is roughly there. And you see there's one in the corner just here that we can paint the bottom line into here. Just put a nice slightly. I've got some black paint here that I've mixed with a little bit of water. What I want you to do is like this, a little bit of water there, just to try and darken up a little bit, a few areas in the paint. And you see there's some darker bits, particularly around the edges in comparison to other bits. So I'm just putting it on it, just darkens it up slightly. Nothing too much, just little bits of this. It just helps darken it up because it's not as thick as proper full-on black, but it does add a little bit of darker but opaque layer to it. So you can still see here, you can still see the brown underneath it, but it's just darkened some of it up a bit. So there you go, got some black paint, mixed it with some water, continue to do the same thing again in a few different little areas, particularly where you want to have a transition between the deep shadow and the underneath, like here. Now I want you to clean this brush we were just using off. Then I'd like you to get some white. If you've got some leftover red like I have here, just get a dab of it there, you see, just a little dab on the end of the brush. Put that in here. If you've got some yellow left, I've got some just there in between the green that I mixed in. Just a little dab of that, just to give it there. And mix it in to this colour there. It's not quite to my liking. A little bit more red. A little bit more yellow. Just want to create a nice light colour for doing some highlights on the rocks. It's okay if you want to add maybe a dab of green, just a tiny touch on the end, just so it doesn't look too pinky, because you don't really want the rocks to look overtly pinky. So I got a little bit dab of green in, just to mix there. There you go, that's a pretty light colour now. what I want you to do is use this brush again. Put a few drops of water in so it moves a bit more fluidly on your brush. And then we're going to go to the painting here, and you see all these dark bits here. We're going to just paint the top bits ahead of it, or just above them, indicating the shadows are on the underneath, the highlights where the light hitting this rock is on top. Feel free to do a few practice ones if you want, but like I say, if you've got a bit of water on your brush, it shouldn't be too bad, and you see you can just do this. If you may decide, like me, do it in the bit where the water's coming down there, so it's not that big a deal. To me, that isn't light enough. I'd like a little bit more of a, but it's too light. I mean, I'd like a slightly different colour. I'd like a very light brown. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Slightly thicker type of colour than the previous one. Make sure you got, like I say, a little bit of water on the brush, and get to be quite loose with it. Don't do too much. Really don't do really rigid brush marks, just try and be quite fluid again. Feel like you've got a lot on, you can just use your finger like that and it kind of takes up some of the colour. Like there, that looks, what was a lot is now a bit dark, a bit lighter. Like the top side of rocks here, not too many of them. Just indicate a bit of highlights here and there on rocks where light's hitting it. If you want to make it darker at all, you can do. If you want to add a bit more in this to make it suit a little more, that's fine. I'm trying to bring the tones up a little bit. Always add little amounts, because you can always work with it and as you wish to add a little bit more and a little bit more. If you put too much in at once, then you can't really fix it. You probably have to mix it again, or put a lot of differing colours in to try and salvage it, which then will take up the entire thing and waste your paint. So it's best to add a little and then add a little more if you need it. So, time to get on with changing these. Making sure there's some highlights in the rocks there. Try and have some follow a pattern too. If the contours of the rock suggest it, that you've already put in, then the highlight should also follow that similar pattern. Apologies if the glare is ruining this bit. My light is starting to annoy even me, so I'm sure you're probably feeling the same. Don't want to completely overpaint everything, so it's kind of just trying to do small highlights over the dark bits. Trying to keep most of that brown in that's below it. If you do a bit much like I've done there, you can wipe out a bit of your finger. It's very important not to try and have anything too symmetrical in here, any patterns that overlap too much, because nature in this rock face would not be symmetrical. Water would be eroding the rock in different ways, and depending on the flow pattern and how it hits the rock, etc. So if you're trying to indicate that, it will be random, because the water and how it falls will mostly be random. Obviously there'll be bits that get hit more than others, but that should show in the unevenness of the rock face. How you're mixing them up like me. I'm doing a few longer ones, some short, very small ones. Again, we're just trying to try and match up what we've just done. Not completely, because we want some bits where there's some difference to where the shadows were, slightly, but most of it is, particularly the big ones, do the light side on top. Bit of paint off there. Just add a bit more. Nearly done with this bit here. I think it's safe to say next time I do one of these classes I will find a better spot than this to go away from the glare. Strawberry is a bit annoying. But yes, that's pretty much also had a lot of dog sounds. There's one just sounding like he's having a dream. Right, now we're going to take some of this light colour we were just using here, add a very small amount of green to it, there, mix it in, and you can either use this brush or switch to this brush here. I'm going to switch over, and you see this nice green here. I'm going to look to mix in and add it, particularly roughly where you want the water sort of direction you want it to go. Like this, you see, because the water's supposed to be coming out this way, minus the rocks in the way, of course. Go again, add a bit more in. Feel free if you're worried that you've done it a bit bright, like I think I've put too much of it there. Just smudge it, like say, with your finger a little bit. Around the edges of the rock you want to have a bit of a light, a bit too, like it's the water's rushing round the rock. Probably best to leave a lightest bit right round where you expect the main body of the waterfall to be here. So there, if you see. Now we're going to do a few little marks. I'm going to switch over to this brush now. If you've got one, make sure you've done it like I've done it here. Make sure these ends is like spread out. We don't want them bunched together much. Now we're going to add a little bit of this black here. You see the little water, make sure it's mixed with a bit of water there. See that? There, mixed with the water. Got some on my brush, not too much. And now what I want you to do is practice first of all, bringing it down very lightly. You see, like this? You see how I'm bringing it lightly and I'm having that effect there. That's the sort of effect we're going for, and we're going to do some darker bit first of all, because you know there's a behind the waterfall here, so they were just having a little bit of the darks in the back of the waterfall. So do it from where you're expecting it to fall down here. See the faint marks like there, just to indicate where water may fall there. Mix a bit more. Do the same again. Can you see a sense of the water flow there down just with those dark marks where we're going to bring some of that water down here. You can also add a bit in there just to indicate where the darker parts of the water may be. Just a few little marks, not many, just add a few where the direction of the water is going to roughly be. Because remember, we're adding white over this too, so it's okay if there's a bit of this, and particularly around the back here where there's going to be shadows behind these rocks, you see. You can get the shadows in almost now. I want to get some on the end here, this brush, and then literally just dab like this, you see. Just get a few splashes, like the dark side of the splashes. Okay, now I want you to wash off this brush, make sure you get it nice and clean. And now we're going to move to the blue and do a very similar thing as we just did, but with the blue. I don't know if you can see here, there is some hints of bluey turquoise in here just from behind, and you see it up top here. So we're going to do a little bit of that. If you've still got a turquoise like me that's still wet, and feel free to use some of that. Make sure you don't have too much on your brush, see, and you can practice the marks again if you're worried about putting too much paint on, trying it with a different colour. There, you see that sort of thing. See, that was too much, you want to do it fainter. There you go, so you've got an idea now. Go back to this and do the same sort of thing. Feel free to have some bouncing off different rocks here too if you want to. Like this big one here, I might want it to bounce off. And there. Then a few dabs of the dots here. Not many, we don't want to overdo it. Got a bit more paint on my brush. And make sure we do some up here too, like is in that. In this painting there's a bit up there. So there you go. Got a bit. There's a few dribs and drabs down here, like you can see in this bit. I don't know how easy you can see it there, but there's a bit of blue in this one too. A little turquoise colour in that. So I'm going to kind of dot it down a little bit in random pattern where you want it, the way you're going to add some white down to trickle from this bit. And feel free to add the occasional dab here. Don't want to overdo it, just enough to indicate a blue side to the water when we paint it in a second. So I don't know if you can see that, it looks like a very strange waterfall right now, but we're going to get the white in a second. Then we're going to paint the rocks in last, because this water is behind this rock, for example. So if we paint in this water, this falling, then we can paint in this rock afterwards. Whereas if we did it the other way round, the water will be falling. You may end up marks of the water falling here, and then it wouldn't look right, because like, why is the water in front of it when it's supposed to be behind it? So it's good to paint things where you can, in order of how they look in the painting, from background to foreground. And we've also, as you can tell, gone from dark to light, from doing the black to blue, and then we're going to do the white in a second. So get some white now. Clean up this brush. Get some white on your brush here, not too much. Well, you can actually get a decent amount actually, and get the first decent clump of white right on this edge where the thing's going to be. Do the dabbing effect here, where the initial fall is going to be. Thick edge there. Now you got most of the paint off your brush. Bring it down in the background here for where this waterfall in the background will be, because this is like the lower level from a waterfall. There's another one be above. Look, you see this dragging it down slightly technique there. And now we'll start on doing the same effect here. Remember to be quite light with your brush, bringing the water down. Try and have different rocks that you want to bounce the water off, like there, and then it bounces off to come down there, you see. Some more like this. keep trying to keeping these light bits going and try and decide where you want it to be a bit thicker. And if you want to do some in the water to get some sort of texture going there, where it help come up with where you want to put more of the, because you see here I've gone quite thick on this side, a little bit thicker there, roaming this way. So if I want to do a big dab there to indicate it flowing quite a lot right there, doing some more white, picking it up, being quite gentle with it, not want to overdo too much. The occasional light dab just where there's some trickles, some splashes happening. There's the occasional rock where you'll want to actually do it sideways slightly here to indicate, and then dab it to indicate there's a mass of water dropping onto it. You almost got to follow the direction the water's falling down in terms of how you portray it. Like if there's a big clump here, you got to give it somewhere where it falls and then bounces off down here of a similar brightness. Just getting more down. It's all about building as you see fit. Good to have on the outside some of the Slight hint of splashes here, like this, where the water's splashing. Particularly these main spots where there's going to be a lot. To indicate where the waterfall's coming from there. It's very slight faint lines to indicate this waterfall in the background. Not too much, we don't want to take the tension away from this one. Just an indication that there's another one in the background that one's falling from. A few more light marks here. Try and match up with some of the blue stuff that you did. Small little trickle down here, slightly different direction here and there. So, still trying to just see where it work up where. That's quite a big bit there you see from me, so I need to make sure the water looks like it's going somewhere. There's quite a lot falling on it. Just trying to even up where there's a big bit falling, making sure it's like it goes off in decent piles too. So otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Right, that's most of this one done. A few bright bits I think I may need to add over there. I'm going to do some of the side trickle stuff here now. Just very faint. Got to be quite delicate with this, because you can always add more if you want to, whereas it's hard to take away if you've done too much. Dab, make sure there's some nice bright white spots here for the water. Feel like you put a bit too much down, feel free to just take some off with your finger like that. Light sense of a trickle there. And just there's one in the painting here, you see coming down there, so I'm going to paint in this one here. It's a rock for it that I painted in it for it to trickle down this way. So building some nice splashes in all over. Here it trickles within the water movement now. Just a hint of, not too much, just a little bit right up to the edges on the sides here. Just lighten it up a bit. See, that is most of the waterfall with that bit done. You can touch up areas where you feel you may want to. You can obviously slightly improve bits if you want to. I'm fairly happy with that. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Maybe add a few bits of white that you can see there into this water. Just copying the flow of water I want to go. Maybe smudging it a bit with my finger so it's not quite as bright. So that's that. I think there's a few dabs I want to do that, but I'm going to switch to this brush now just to add a few thicker white bits on a few little things from my quite like to, just to make sure the white is thicker in a few areas, a few key bits. Few small bits here and there. It's a bit too much blue here for my liking. Not enough indication of water. think that'll do that now. Now we are going to switch to this brush here. Make sure it's cleaned off if you've got any paint on it. I'm going to get some more white paint. No, black paint, sorry. Completely opposite colour. Should know. There's the black paint. Get a fairly decent amount on your brush. And you see these here? I'm just going to paint roughly in the kind of shapes to be expected. There. So if you see this one, it's going to be there. Goes at a slight angle up here. Just touches past where it breaks that line. And then comes back down. Probably a little bit deeper too here. There. This one similarly does the same thing, just touches up to that one there. Similar sort of, not exactly the same shape, but not too dissimilar. Like it's been eroded more in one way than the other. And this is the biggest one of the lot there. It's going to touch all the way up right onto here, break that line there. Do this bottom one. Slightly uneven shape, much smaller. There, see we've got some of that in. Now the intention is to bring some white in from this. There, it's okay if you still got black on your brush. We're just going to bring it in, particularly on higher up on the rock here, just indicate a certain texture. To the rock. This white is just mixing with the black paint and creating some interesting contour and light moments here to give that sort of sense of it being a rock. This one's a bit too much, I think. There, we'll need, particularly along the bottom where it should be at its darkest. So now I'm going to switch to the this smaller brush we haven't used yet. And if you've got white like this that's free, take some on your brush, and we want to go around the edges of this rock slightly, just to indicate it's where the light's hitting it. which indicates there will be a few spots on the actual rock where it'll be lighter too. Start on this one. Make sure you leave some unevenness on the outside of the rock, because the rocks they won't be symmetrical. They will have rough, weird edges on them. From where particularly this waterfall, where the water's hitting it in different directions at different strengths, eroding it over time. There you go, indicating a few different sides of the rock. If you've got picks up some darker colours on the brush, feel free, you can wipe them off. It's a good idea too. There you go, final one. Oh, actually we've got this one here. So there's that. Pretty much done. I just want to add a few dark bits with this same brush by going into the black. Just indicate where the water's flowing in these shadowy areas. Still going with this. You can see there, just adding a few more marks for where the shadow would be there. Not too much, trying to smooth it out a bit. The occasional dab in here too for the splash. The watery bit might be useful again there. Just getting a bit of water on it. Couple more dabs of the white I think here, just to indicate where it's coming out now. This direction. Still going with this bit, tiny few bits more of these rock edge highlights there to indicate the stone. If any of them are a bit too bright for you, you can mute them slightly just by dabbing your finger on it. Just needs a bit more dark in this, I think. Then I'll call it, say I'm done. So there's paintings side by side next to each other. I think I'm done. Sorry about the glare. Try and do an angle that at least takes the glare out. So there's that. I'll have a proper image on the screen in a second to give you a better indication of how mine turned out. I'd love to hear how yours turned out. Please contact me on social media if you want. I'm at Robbie Potter Art is the handle, Robbie Potter Art. My website is robbiepotterart.com, and please do like and subscribe to this channel if you like it. Do feel free to check out my other original artworks. You can even buy one if you want, or commission a personalised painting if you wish. I hope you enjoyed today's class, and I hope you join me again for another in the future. Like I say, feel free to let me know how yours turned out, send me the picture, ask any questions you want. Happy to hear from you, and I hope you had a good time painting today. This is a fun one, particularly the final bit when you're bringing out the water and the trickling down at the end. And there we go. Hope you're happy with yours, and I'll see you again in the future.